Europe, a continent of ancient empires, proud nations, and fragile peace. But on one ordinary morning in 1939, that peace shattered, and the world slipped into a darkness that would change history forever. This is the story of how Europe burned. The road to destruction did not begin with gunfire. It began with silence. A silence so heavy that leaders across Europe could feel history trembling beneath their feet. In the heart of Germany, Adolf Hitler watched Europe with cold ambition. He had risen to power, promising jobs, stability, and national pride. But beneath those promises was something far more dangerous, a vision of domination and revenge for the humiliation of World War I. Germany was rebuilding its armies in secret. Factories glowed through the night, producing tanks, aircraft, ammunition, and a new generation of soldiers ready to fight for the Führer. But the world did nothing. Britain and France, still wounded from the last war, hoped diplomacy could tame a dictator. They hoped appeasement would satisfy him. They were wrong. At dawn on September 1st, 1939, German soldiers crossed the border into Poland. The Blitzkrieg had begun. Lightning war. It was fast, violent, unstoppable. Columns of tanks crushed defenses. Stuka bombers screamed from the skies, dropping death on cities and villages. Within hours, Poland was collapsing. Sound design moment. Air raid sirens, distant explosions, marching boots. For the first time, Europe witnessed Hitler's new kind of warfare, a war driven by speed and terror. Britain and France issued an ultimatum: withdraw or face war. Hitler did not even reply. On September 3, 1939, Europe plunged into the Second World War. But what Poland didn't know was that it was surrounded by more than just Germany. On the 17th of September, Soviet forces invaded from the east. In a secret agreement, Hitler and Stalin had already decided Poland's fate. Within weeks, the nation was erased from the map. After Poland fell, something strange happened. Nothing. For months, the Western Front remained silent. Newspapers called it the Phony War. British soldiers waited behind the Maginot Line, a massive wall of fortresses and bunkers stretching across France's eastern border. They believed it was impenetrable. They believed they were safe. But Hitler was planning something no one expected. In Berlin, generals prepared for Fallgelb, the invasion of Western Europe. Their plan was bold, risky, and brilliant. They would not attack France head-on. They would strike through the Ardennes forest, a place Allied commanders thought tanks could never pass. They were wrong. While Europe watched and waited, Hitler moved again, north towards Scandinavia. On April 9, 1940, German warships approached Danish and Norwegian ports. The invasions were swift, precise, and devastating. Denmark fell in just 6 hours, one of the fastest military collapses in modern history. Norway fought fiercely, but Germany's air power crushed resistance. With Scandinavia in his hands, Hitler secured iron ore shipments, the lifeblood of his war machine. The Allies were stunned. Germany was moving faster than anyone could react. But the real blow was still to come. At dawn on May 10, 1940, the sky above Belgium and the Netherlands darkened with German aircraft. Troops parachuted from the clouds. The first major airborne invasion in history. Cities fell within hours. The Netherlands surrendered in just 5 days after Rotterdam burned under a brutal bombing raid. But while the Allies rushed north to protect Belgium, Hitler unleashed the heart of his strategy. Deep within the Ardennes, tens of thousands of German tanks and vehicles poured through the forest. The impossible had become real. French defenses collapsed like paper. The German army had outmaneuvered them completely. By late May, the Allied armies were split, surrounded, and pushed toward the sea. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers were trapped near a small French port, Dunkirk. They were outnumbered, outgunned, hopeless. But then, something incredible happened. British civilians, fishermen, sailors, even weekend boaters sailed across the English Channel. Together with the Royal Navy, they formed a massive rescue armada. For 9 days, under constant bombing, they pulled over 330,000 soldiers off the beaches. Dunkirk was not a victory, but it saved an army that would one day liberate Europe. Hitler had conquered France, but he had not broken Britain, not yet. France, the mighty power of Europe, collapsed in just 6 weeks. Paris, a city of art, culture, and centuries of history, fell without a fight. German soldiers marched beneath the Arc de Triomphe, and Europe trembled at the sight. To Hitler, this was revenge for Germany's defeat in World War I. Europe was now divided, the Nazi Empire in the center, Italy rising in the south, and to the east, the Soviet Union, watching, waiting. Only one nation still stood between Hitler and total domination of Europe, Britain, and Hitler was preparing to destroy it. Europe lay in chains. Country after country had fallen under the weight of Nazi power, but the war was far from over. In the next chapter, the skies above Britain will ignite, a dictator will turn to the east, and Europe will witness the deadliest invasion in human history. This is only the beginning. By the summer of 1940, Europe had fallen silent under Nazi rule. But across the Channel, one island nation refused to bow. Britain stood alone. Hitler believed Britain would surrender with enough pressure, so he turned to the Luftwaffe, the most powerful air force in the world. The plan was simple: destroy Britain's air defenses, bomb her cities, break her spirit. On July 10, 1940, the sky above the English Channel erupted. German bombers pushed forward in tight formations, escorted by fast and deadly Messerschmitt fighters. But waiting for them were the British Spitfires and Hurricanes, pilots who flew until their fuel was gone, their guns were empty, or their aircraft were falling apart. Many were teenagers. Some were from Poland, France, New Zealand, and Canada, volunteers who came to defend freedom. The battle raged for months. London burned night after night as the Blitz turned streets into firestorms. But Britain did not break. In October, Hitler realized something unthinkable. He could not defeat the Royal Air Force. For the first time, the Nazi war machine had been stopped. But Hitler's pride would not allow him to wait. His eyes shifted east, toward the largest nation in the world. June 22, 1941. 3 million German soldiers stood along the Soviet border. It was the largest invasion force in human history. Hitler believed he could conquer the Soviet Union in just a few months. He believed its people were weak, its army outdated, its leadership broken. He believed wrong. At dawn, German tanks rolled across the frontier. The sky thundered with thousands of aircraft. City after city fell in days. Minsk, Smolensk, Kiev. The speed was terrifying. The world watched as Germany advanced deeper and deeper into the Soviet heartland. But the further the Germans pushed, the more resistance they faced. And then came the Russian winter. The German army was not prepared. Temperatures dropped to minus 30 degrees Celsius. Engines froze. Rifles jammed. Fuel turned to jelly. Soldiers wrapped their feet in newspapers and rags. Frostbite crippled entire divisions. Meanwhile, Soviet reinforcements arrived from the east. Fresh troops hardened by years of brutal winters. Hitler demanded his armies keep fighting, but nature itself had turned against him.
For the first time since the war began, the Nazis were forced to retreat. The myth of their invincibility was broken. Far to the north, another nightmare unfolded, the siege of Leningrad. For 900 days, the Germans surrounded the city, cutting off food, heat, and supplies. People burned furniture to stay warm. They boiled wallpaper for the glue. They starved, but they refused to surrender. One survivor wrote in her diary, "We are dying, but we will not open the gates." Leningrad became a symbol, a city that chose death over defeat. By 1942, Hitler's next target was the city of Stalingrad, a name that enraged him, a symbol he wanted to destroy. The battle began in the summer. It became one of the bloodiest battles in human history. Every street, every house, every stairway became a battlefield. German soldiers captured factories by day, only to lose them at night as Soviet troops crawled through rubble and ruins. Then winter came again, and the Soviets launched a massive counterattack, encircling the entire German Sixth Army. Hitler ordered them not to retreat. They obeyed, and they were swallowed by the snow and steel of Stalingrad. In February 1943, 91,000 German soldiers surrendered. Only 5,000 would ever return home. Stalingrad was the turning point. From that moment, Germany was on the defensive. While the Eastern Front raged, the Western Allies prepared for their return to Europe. British and American forces pushed into North Africa, defeating German and Italian armies. Then they invaded Italy, forcing Mussolini's regime to collapse. Rome fell in June 1944. The noose around Germany tightened. But the final blow would come from the West, a massive operation unlike anything the world had ever seen. June 6, 1944. Before dawn, the sky above France filled with aircraft. Thousands of parachutes drifted in the darkness. At sea, the largest invasion fleet in history approached the Normandy coast. For many of the young men on those boats, this was their first battle. For thousands, it would be their last. When the ramps lowered, they stepped into waves, bullets, and chaos. Machine guns tore through the air. Explosions turned the shoreline into a storm of sand and fire. But hour after hour, the Allies pushed forward. By nightfall, 5 beachheads were secured. The liberation of Europe had begun. After D-Day, Allied forces advanced rapidly. France was liberated. Belgium and the Netherlands followed. Germany fought desperately, launching a final counterattack in the Ardennes, the Battle of the Bulge. But it failed. By early 1945, Soviet forces closed in from the east, American and British forces from the west. Berlin was surrounded. In April, the city fell into ruins under relentless assault. Inside a bunker beneath the capital, Adolf Hitler ended his own life. A week later, Germany surrendered. Europe's nightmare was over. World War II in Europe was a tragedy beyond measure. A story of destruction, bravery, cruelty, sacrifice, and resilience. Cities were erased, nations shattered, millions lost. But from the ashes, a new Europe was born, one determined never to walk the road to war again. The story of Europe in World War II is not just history. It is a warning and a reminder of how fragile peace can be.